operations. Well, Mark Howden is Director of the Institute for Climate, Energy and Disaster Solutions at the Australian National University. And Mark, it is hard to imagine just how challenging it is on Mayotte currently, given what they've been through.
Absolutely. It sounds like a serious disaster that's happened there with massive damage and loss of life. Terrible thing to see.
Making it very difficult, isn't it, to get the emergency aid required to find survivors, because even the airport, key elements of infrastructure are severely damaged.
That's right. And so I think one of the things we learn from these sorts of events is to have teams standing by ready for very, very rapid move into these areas once the cyclone's passed. So having people and material to go, ready to go, is I think an increasingly important part of the response.
In terms of looking at what happened here, of course, we've had a few days now to digest this cyclone, its impact on Mayotte in particular. What factors contributed to the devastation, would you say?
Well, there's multiple things, but a core one, of course, is climate change. But before we go to climate change, just important to recognise that this part of the southwest Indian Ocean has a history of very, very intense and damaging cyclones. So a big slab of the world record rainfall occurs in this part of the world: Reunion Island, Mauritius, the Comoros Islands, and as one example, the world record rainfall over 3 days is over 3 metres, which occurred at Reunion Island, not that far away. So there is a history of really severe storms because of the very warm water conditions that experience around here. But what's happened with climate change is those waters are now warmer than they used to be. That provides more energy for cyclones, and under certain circumstances, they can really build up very quickly. So what we're seeing with climate change is longer cyclone tracks. So this one started off in the central part of the Indian Ocean and travelled all the way across to Africa. We're also seeing much more rapid intensification. So they go from relatively weak to very strong very quickly. And so that's a challenge in terms of predicting their paths and the strength and the damage they'll cause. And when we look at climate change influences, we see that the category 3, 4 and 5 cyclones, the really bad ones, they used to be around 20% of cyclones in the Indian Ocean. It's now about 40% of cyclones. So we've seen a doubling of the proportion of the really, really nasty cyclones. So that damage function from those cyclones is increasing because of climate change. And
yet you say all of this, and yet on Mayotte, so many of the buildings were not strong enough to withstand this kind of cyclone. Of course, they cannot be 100% prepared, but so many of the infrastructure was extremely fragile anyway. Absolutely, and this is replicated in many, many parts of the world, developing countries particularly. And so even a well-built building has trouble standing up to 200 kilometres an hour plus winds that occur in a Category 4 cyclone. And so even a really well-built, solidly built building with good design and good infrastructure, good materials, is going to have trouble, let alone a shanty. And the problems there is that if one of those buildings blows down, it sends things like corrugated iron spiralling into the, across the landscape at 200 kilometres an hour. Like that's deadly. And so then that hits another building and breaks that up, and so it just replicates. So key things here are we have to improve the standard of building, and we know how to do that. It just costs money and time and people to do that. We also have to put in place early warning systems that are linked to more action plans. All right, Mark, we've got to leave it there, but we appreciate your expertise. Thanks for sharing your thoughts on what's been going on in Mayotte. Thanks very much. Cheers.